Hello everyone, Diane Conroy-Lasavita from Colony Seniors, and I am thrilled we have another opportunity for having a conversation. Today's conversation is with Carol Whittaker. She is an extraordinary woman with a wonderful life path, and I'm so glad she's allowed us into her home and to have this conversation. So thank you, Carol.
You're very welcome.
So now
we have a beautiful day.
It is. This is this is fairly new. She's been here 3 years. And what township is this?
This is Rotterdam.
Rotterdam. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of people think of it as Guilderland because it's very close to the line, but it's technically in Rotterdam.
It's gorgeous. These are beautiful townhouses. A lot different, and we'll get into that. So last time I was to Carol's home, which was another home. It was about a 180-degree difference from this home, so it's interesting. Carol, let's start with the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Canandaigua and lived with my mom because my dad was off having adventures in World War II. And he did have adventures. He flew the hump. He, take a guy off the farm and send them off to learn to fly airplanes. They'll never be the same again. So I didn't really know my dad until he came back from the Second World War, and then my family moved to a small town named PHELPS, which is close to Canandaigua. It was known as the world's largest producer of sauerkraut.
Do you like sauerkraut?
Claim to fame. I do, but I don't have it very often.
Do they have a sauerkraut festival?
They certainly do. And they continue to have that, even though there is no longer sauerkraut produced in Phelps.
Oh, isn't that funny? I never heard of Phelps. It must be a small town.
It's it's a bedroom community for Rochester, I think, now. A place when you're growing up in the 40s and 50s that's perfect for a kid. I'm sure my parents felt that way because when I got in trouble, everyone knew my parents and they could let them know right away.
They'd walk you home and let them know. Canandaigua's lovely as well.
It is.
Beautiful.
It is, yeah.
Now, were you an only child?
No, but my brothers were much younger than I. One 7 years younger and one 12 years younger. So I was going off to college when my younger brother was going to kindergarten. So
Big difference. Wow. All right. So where did you go to college?
Well, by the time I was in late high school, I was dating a guy who was a student at Union College. So instead of going to a college in the Midwest, I decided to come to Albany to go to school here because I always thought that I wanted to be a teacher. So we got married during my freshman year and his junior year.
Wow.
No.
Got married young.
Married young, had my kids young, and then decided, okay, time to go back to school and to have it's hard to call it a career because I bounced around a lot, but go to work. So that was...
we call those chapters. And those
exactly.
Are good.
And so the second chapter for me started when I was 21 and had my second daughter and decided, okay, family's ready. Now I got some work to do. So.
Now, where did you do your undergraduate? At Albany?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
In education?
In education. But then I did my student teaching, and I figured I could ruin so many generations of students if I continued teaching. So that was a disappointment, but I loved school, so I decided I would continue school, and I got a degree, a master's degree in education, kind of as an insurance policy. I could always do that if nothing else worked out. Plan B.
That's right, good plan B, yeah. And so, all right, so you have 2 children, you have your undergrad, you have your graduate, and you're thinking, what is my next chapter, correct?
Right. Boy, was I fortunate because I was offered a position, at first a temporary position, it soon became permanent, in Governor Rockefeller's office. And at that time, he had wanted to create an office which was kind of like an inspector general's office aimed at the education department. Education was regarded as the fourth branch of government, and the legislature wasn't about to let him do this, set up this inspector general's office. But he said, they can't stop me from doing it in the executive chamber. So he set it up in his own office. I had just graduated with this degree in education. So I became an education, well, what do they call this? Education policy analyst. And of course, I'd done no analysis in my life, but I could write. And that was the secret to success in that office. If you could write persuasively on the things that you were asked to write about, you did very well. And I loved it. I mean, I just knew that, I'm almost 80. I've been working ever since. And I don't know what will happen when I stop working. That will be the next chapter.
How was it working for Governor Rockefeller?
Well, we didn't see a lot of him. He soon left to become the vice president under Gerald Ford, and then he wanted to run for president. The office kept going, of course, but when Kerry was running to become governor, he said if he was elected, he would abolish that office. So as soon as he was elected, I knew I had to find another job. All of us had to find another job. But I went from that to being a budget analyst, for example. Everything was a stepping stone to the next opportunity. And I just feel so fortunate that I had so many of these opportunities. Yeah, there were bumps along the way, but I'm a firm believer that when one door closes, another one's going to open up, and that you end up on your feet, And if you have some skills that are appreciated and needed, you're going to find opportunities.
Now, for everyone watching, I've known Carol a while, a good 10 or 12 years probably, maybe a little longer. And she was involved with the International Center of the Capital Region. And so when I met her during that chapter, she was very involved with the School of Public Health over at Albany on their East Campus. So now, how did you end up there?
Well, the Commissioner of Health, David Axelrod, decided to partner with the University at Albany to create a School of Public Health at the university. My understanding is that Axelrod would have created the school totally in the health department, except that he needed some institution to sign the diplomas, So the School of Public Health was created, and many of us at the health department had the opportunity to move to the school as health department employees. It was a very interesting experiment that a working health department, and of course the New York State Health Department, at least at that time, was considered the epitome of state health departments, would be training the next generation of public health professionals. So I had been creating programs within the health department, and I had a teaching certificate, if nothing else, not much experience, but I realized when I got to the schools that I really loved teaching graduate students. They were there because they wanted to be there. And so the dean at that time was David Carpenter. And David said that he was a little befuddled. He had all these people coming from the health department. Of course, he was from the health department. And he had to give us titles, not health department titles, but university titles. So my title was Assistant Dean for New Fun Stuff. I
Did you have a
love that
business
title.
card?
And we did have fun. I mean, we created a lot of new programs. I'm still teaching online. That was one of my first new programs at the school. Because at that time, we didn't have the internet. Al Gore hadn't gotten around to inventing the internet. He was busy doing other things. So we were using video conferencing equipment to expand our range. We were supposed to expand our range and be the only school of public health for the state of New York. So we were supposed to take our program to all of the parts of New York. Well, it was not easy with that kind of equipment to do that. So when the internet came along and we were able to use that platform for online teaching and learning, it was great. And I've been doing it ever since. I'm really happy that I started out teaching online because you can do it from anywhere where you have a good connection.
Right.
So I've been able to do it in Malawi and when I'm, living elsewhere rather than here. So.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So at some point, you're there. You go as a health department employee, and now you become part of the School of Public Health, right? The assistant dean of having fun. I love that. But so you start dwelling in or delving into international health. Now, how did that happen?
Well, you get to meet a lot of people, as you well know. And so one day I got a call from Warren Paley. And Warren Paley, for those who have long memories, they'll probably remember that he established the first HMO in this area called the Community Health Plan. But he also was interested in international health. And he had a small group of his staff that were working on things related to healthcare reform, especially in the countries that had been under the former Soviet Union. So he asked me if I wanted to take part in a program that they had in Romania. Didn't take me long to say, yes, of course, what do I have to do that? And so I went with Warren, and that program was sponsored by the Soros Foundation. And so when I came back, I met with people from the Soros Foundation, and we talked about a fellowship for people from the former Soviet republics in public health. Because I said you can't build democracies, which is what the Soros Foundation wanted to do, without providing people good public health. They agreed, and so I was able to start bringing students here from, at that time it was primarily the students of the former Soviet Union. I got to travel to many of those countries. I especially like the stands, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. And then it branched out. The Soros Foundation had funding to support a Mongolian fellowship. And we had some of the best students you'd ever want to meet who came from Mongolia. They're back in Mongolia still doing wonderful things. It was just very exciting to start bringing international students to this area. And one of our deans told me at one time that I was doing my job way too well, that we had too many international students. You would never hear that today. Of course, with the Trump administration's policies, with COVID and visa restrictions, there's been a huge decline in the number of international students. Of course, the university loves international students. We loved our international students. There's nothing better for diversity for our students, our domestic students, to get to know people from these countries. So we had a dean, Phil Nasca, who was very interested in international health, and he asked me to create the Center for Global Health at the school. And so for 8 years, we just grew and grew that program, and it was wonderful. And I think it was during that time that I met you for the ICCR.
Yeah. Yeah. Feels like a lifetime ago for me. Yeah, no, it was good. Now, I know at one point in your life you lived in Malawi for part of a year. So how did you get there? And was it related to your job, or was that your getaway place?
Malawi would not be most people's first choice. They'd be wrong if that wasn't at the top of their list. I had first gone to Malawi. My first trip to Africa was a camping trip. And we started out in Nairobi and we ended up in Johannesburg. And on the way, we camped for a few nights on Lake Malawi. And I just remember looking up and seeing the stars there. It was just miraculous. The first time I've ever been overwhelmed by the Milky Way. I mean, that you could see it so clearly there. But I just found that I love Malawi. It is one of the poorest countries in the world. But it's an English-speaking country, and one of my skills is not learning foreign languages. So to be able to teach in an English-speaking country was, a goal. And to live in a different culture. I had traveled a great deal, but I had always been regarded as an honored guest. I never felt, if I had not been a mother when the Peace Corps was first developed, I think I would have been one of the first people to join the Peace Corps. But this was my opportunity to live in a different culture, even though, again, I stayed at the college guest house, that sort of thing. But I was given a faculty appointment to the University of Malawi's College of Medicine, where they have a School of Public Health and Family Medicine. And so for 3 years, I guess it was 2013, 14, and 15, in the spring semester, I would go to Malawi, where because I had opportunity to teach there, but I could also teach my students back here because of the good internet connection that I was able to establish. So I was teaching online, my students here, and teaching in person, their students there. And it was a wonderful opportunity. Some of my best friends remain in Malawi. I wish that they had the chance to come here or that I might go back there. But they're wonderful people, and I will always feel that that was one of the most wonderful times of my life.
Oh, isn't that incredible? Wow. I never even knew the term, I'm going to say, before I met you on epidemiology. I was like, what is that? Now you hear it all the time. Everybody's an epidemiologist, and they're piping in and giving us their opinions and their concerns. So really, I'm just wondering the difference between, like living in Malawi, you were probably dealing with all sorts of diseases that we would never even contemplated here in the United States.
Well, we did, but we overcame them.
Yeah.
And maybe with climate change, we'll have to face some of them again.
Absolutely.
Malaria is one of those, Malaria is a terrible scourge there. They are one of the countries that is now taking advantage of this new malaria vaccine. So we'll see if that doesn't have an impact. But yes, malaria, it may not kill you right away. I mean, my father served in India, China, and Burma during the Second World War, and he contracted malaria. And, you know, he had it for the rest of his life because it remains in your body. And that's what happens in countries like African countries where there's so much malaria. You and I can take a low-grade antibiotic every day and protect ourselves from it. But, you know, they don't have that advantage, and so once it's in their body, they have reoccurring bouts of malaria. And for children, it's devastating.
Yeah, I think going through the last year we went through, just the term and the understanding of communicable diseases, and that we aren't necessarily shielded from those is very apparent. So the School of Public Health and the interest in international, hopefully will have an uptick. You know, we
It
aren't
definitely
denying.
has. I mean, it already has, we've seen the increase in the number of students who are applying to schools of public health. We put all of our funding into curing people once they're sick, rather than the 3% that we grudgingly give to preventing disease. So I think that maybe people will wake up. When 9/11 came, we thought, oh, we have to be more prepared. And so preparedness and emergency preparedness became the watchword. Then we began seeing things like hurricanes and natural disasters. Oh, we have to be more prepared for those kinds of things. Now, of course, we're seeing the increase in communicable diseases, infectious diseases. I think there will be a greater tendency towards what's now called One Health. And that is where human health, animal health, and the environment intersect. Because we just need to realize that so many of our infectious diseases are now starting in animals. And we're encroaching upon their living space. They don't like that. You know, we have to be aware of these intersections, and definitely happening. I mean, students are interested in public health. They always have been. It's what's known as a hidden career field, because when everything goes right, nobody questions it, you know? To prevent disease, how do you measure what doesn't happen? Then when something goes wrong, there's an outbreak of measles, everyone says, what went wrong? You know, who's to blame? And fingers start to be pointed at, you know, different, their fault, their fault. But I think that people now realize that we have to pay attention to what we need to do to ensure human health, animal health, and the environment.
That's pretty profound. It is, honestly. And it's good to think in those terms. I want to get to the fun stuff, your hobbies, and maybe a little bit about your family before we conclude. So you have 2 daughters.
I have 2 daughters, a granddaughter, and 3 great-grandsons.
Good for you.
2 of whom are now teenagers. I don't know how that came about, but...
It's amazing how time goes. Wow. And so your hobbies, you like to hike. I learned today you used to ride motorcycles.
Yeah. I've flown airplanes.
There you go.
But the air is much safer now because I'm no longer flying airplanes. And I sold my last motorcycle to one of my former students. So the roads are much safer now too. I'm very happy with my Subaru Outback. That's a pretty safe vehicle. So, yes, my knees don't like me to hike the way I used to, but boy, you know, that was a wonderful, you know, many decades of hiking because we're so close to the Adirondacks. As a kid, I enjoyed riding horseback. I had the wonderful opportunity of babysitting in exchange for learning to ride, and so it was a great relationship. I would babysit for the child of people who raised and showed Arabian horses. So I got to learn to care for and to ride English and Western and travel with them when they went to the shows. They lived on a Boy Scout camp too. So I had the run of the Boy Scout camp on horseback. And yeah, it was pretty cool. But I learned a few years ago when I was riding with some friends that horses seem to be bigger now than they used to. You sit up a lot higher. It's a lot harder to get onto them, a lot harder to get off of them. Somewhere along the line they grew. So I don't do as much riding. I had a friend who took a terrible spill, and it kind of makes you realize, you know,
Stuff can happen.
stuff can happen.
I'm wondering, last question, what advice would you give to a woman, not doesn't even necessarily have to be a young woman, a woman who's thinking about maybe a change in a career path, maybe public health, looking at being open to changes in chapters?
You know, we think about this a lot. COVID has given many of us a chance to think a lot about our own path, the way forward and everything. I mentioned before that for me, every time one door closed, another one opened. And I think that if people are open to those opportunities, being less likely to say no right away and to give things a chance. Most of us have many second chances, and not to be afraid of those opportunities. I don't know, for me, having my children at a young age worked out perfectly. And I know that a lot of people today wait to have their children until they're much older. I don't think that would have worked for me, but that means that there are different ways for different people, and they just have to go with whatever is going to bring them along the path that they have chosen, or that confronts them. Because sometimes we don't have a choice. But other times when we do have a choice, take advantage of it, I guess. That doesn't sound very profound to me.
I like that though. Take the chance. Thank you, Carol. Thank you.
You're very
On
welcome.
behalf of Colony Senior Service Centers, our staff and board, I want to thank you, and thank you for tuning in. This has been a wonderful conversation with Carol Whittaker. Be well, everyone.